beautiful above, and then suddenly the northern lights flare up, and you're holding a glass of cold Icelandic water in your hand. It's something you'll never forget. And in the summer, the number of inhabitants in this area quintuplets. There are 5 times as many people here in the summer as during the winter. And over the weekends in the winter, the number of people here doubles. So many people want to go out into their homes, into their summer house, just to relax. A guide colleague of mine from Germany, when she came to Iceland as an au pair in the beginning, she didn't understand why the kids were so enthusiastic. We're going to the summer house over the weekend. We're going to the summer house. Yes, yes, yes. Við erum að fara í sumarbústaðinn. And she went with them and thought, okay, what's this going to be? And she said, today I just love it. It was so calming, so relaxing, and they were all enjoying themselves. So the kids who were naughty and mischievous during the day, during the week, in the summer house, they suddenly turned into angels. Now here ahead on the right hand side, we have a row of volcanic craters that erupted about 6,000 years ago, 6,500 years ago. And the northernmost is called Kerið, K-E-R-I-D. Kerið, you can walk around on top of the crater, you can walk into the crater, and in the summer we sometimes have a float on the lake at the bottom of the crater, and singers, both classical and pop singers, will do their things on that float in the crater. It's just like a Roman amphitheater. You see the people up here to the right walking around the crater. If you're in Iceland again, I would suggest go out here, visit Kerið. We don't have time for that. And you see the buses. And out here to the left, you see the summer houses. And those 2 hills ahead, mountains, they're craters. And one of them they've been using to get building material from. The tephra, the vekur, and the color of that is red. It's because of the iron content in the lava. When the iron content gets in contact with the oxygen in the air, it will oxidize, it will rust. The color becomes red. The same color as we have in the Rauðhólar, the pseudocraters in Reykjavík. when it comes to agriculture in Iceland, we produce enough meat for inland consumption, enough vegetables in the greenhouses, and in the summer we grow potatoes and turnips and neeps out in the open, and enough for inland consumption. And we produce a lot of tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, salads in greenhouses. And we're going to visit one of those greenhouses, the tomato farm Friðheimar, the World of Peace, and they produce over 50% of the inland consumption of of inland grown tomatoes. Every single day they will move 2 metric tons of tomatoes to Reykjavik, and they were just going to have the tomatoes as a side business. We're going to have a horse farm to show people the Icelandic horse and have horse shows, but they also had a small greenhouse where they grew tomatoes, and all their guests would ask, can we see how we grow tomatoes in Iceland? Sure. And then they realized everyone wants to see our tomatoes. Maybe we should do something with that. And they decided to do that. And last year they had over 200,000 guests on their farm visiting to see how they grow tomatoes. And they have a restaurant there, and this summer I was going to book a table, and the next available slot was in November. Very popular, sought after, and everything they serve is local. It's even from their farm. The tomatoes, home-baked bread, tomato soup, tomato beer, tomato pesto. Absolutely gorgeous. And I always love visiting them because earlier they were my students, both Knútur and Helena. I was a teacher of English and German for 46 years. Now I'm retired. Then I can do this full time. In Iceland, the law says if you're employed by the state, which I was as a teacher, secondary school teacher, you cannot work after you turn 70. Then you're no good. And I was just thrown out. I resigned, and I just had to stop. And a few years back, my wife and I were talking about this fact that we had to retire when we turned 70. What can we do after that, where age won't stop us? I don't know, I said. She said, come with me to the guide school. Guide school, Thorun? Me? Become a tourist guide? Nah, that's nothing for me. And I closed that. A few days later, well, maybe, why not? So we did it, went to school, took all the courses and exams to become certified tourist guides in Iceland. And I even extended my driver's license so I can drive buses as well, be a driver guide, and I absolutely love it. It's just an extension of my teaching. And you know, there are 3 professions in the world where The professionals love the sound of their own voice. The politicians, the teachers, and the tourist guides. We just talk without anyone listening. No, you're all listening. Some of you resting your eyelids, but that's okay. And this is just a fact. And my kids always said, when they were asked, so what did you do when you were traveling to Akureyri, to the north of Iceland? Oh, Dad was telling us something. I never had a DVD player or anything on in the cars for them to watch. I was telling them about this and that, and remember, and now you notice this. Look at the lava formations out there, and yes, okay. And as I say, I just love it. And I mean, if you don't love what you're doing, if you don't love showing off this beautiful country, I mean, come on, then you don't do it. This is my 52nd Golden Circle this year, and I still love it. Every day is different.
Ask the question.
Yes.
Yes. You said the black birch was the only native tree in Iceland?
Yes.
Do you know anything about the native plants of Iceland? Flowers and flora?
The flowers and the ling and all that, the flora, there's so much of that is native. The ling, the berries, the crowberries, the blueberries, they are native, not native. They may have been brought by the birds, and that's how they've spread. Also how the trees have been spreading, just being brought around by the birds and the wind. And the lower flora, the lower plants, they are indigenous as well. I have to look up for the names of them all. But it's rich, but not that rich. And then in the 1950s, we imported the Alaska lupine to make the soil more fertile and stop soil erosion, or land erosion, wind erosion, and the plants, the lupine has done a good job stopping wind erosion, but no one realized how aggressive and invasive the plant was. So it's spreading all over the country, even in areas where we have the lower plants, the ling, the berries, and the lupine is eradicating those plants. When the lupine dies off 15 years after it emerges in the area, then all the other plants have also disappeared. They will also be dead and disappear. But we grow enough hay during the summer for our animals. Any corn that we have to import for the pigs, and extra feed for the sheep and cattle and horses, and for the chickens. And for centuries our economy rested on two pillars: the agriculture and the fisheries, the fishing, and the export of dried fish, stockfish, and salted fish. Today, about 20% of our economy comes from the fisheries, from the revenue that we get, and 12% from the agriculture. About 20% of our revenue comes from aluminum smelters. Aluminum smelters in the 1960s we had 3 consecutive years during which the catch of herring failed, and then the government said we must do something about our economy, we must diversify it. Yes, what do we have? Electricity? We can't export that. There are no cables to Scotland or anything. Okay, but what if we get companies that need a lot of energy to come to Iceland? Okay, that's an idea. And the government made an agreement with the Swiss company, Alu-Swiss, aluminium smelters. They built a smelter, the one you drove past on your way from the airport to Reykjavik, the big factory there. And it commenced operations in 1969. Today we have 3 smelters in Iceland, and as I say, 20% of our revenue comes from that. That's only what? 52%. 35% or more of our revenue comes from tourism. So thank you all very much for visiting Iceland. It means a lot to our economy. And after the financial crisis in 2008, the exchange rate of the Icelandic krona towards the dollar and the euro and pound became favorable to guests in Iceland, and people started flocking to Iceland. In 2005 we had just around 350,000 tourists in Iceland, and in 2010-11 we saw a rise in an increase in the tourists coming to Iceland up to 28% from one year to the other. That is extreme. And in 2019, the last year before the pandemic, we had 2.3 million guests in Iceland. And then after the pandemic in 2020, nothing. The first part of 21, very little. And then on March 19th we had an eruption opening in Fagradalsfjall, and then suddenly I want to come to Iceland. And people were willing to come to Iceland, go through all kinds of screenings and tests and what have we, and wear masks all the time on board the buses. But they wanted to go to see the volcano in what it was so tourist friendly. And last year just an increase, this year the same, and next year they expect more. This year we have about 2.3 million guests in Iceland. Out here to the right, where you see the light, there is a church there, the Cathedral of Skálholt. We turned Christian in the year 1000, Catholic, and the first bishops in Iceland, they were sitting in Trondheim, in Nidaros in Norway, and then in 1056 we established the first bishopric here in Skálholt in the south of Iceland, and another one in 1103 in the north of Iceland, in Hólar. And we were Catholic until the middle of the 16th century. On November 7th, 1550, our last Catholic bishop was beheaded here in Skálholt, along with 2 of his sons. He had 7 kids. but he was the